again, and thanks for tuning in for the third episode of Google Game Summit 2020. I am your host, Aman Grover from Google India, and so happy to meet all of you today. Today, as you know, we have a few special guests with us, and I'm very excited to welcome Mr. Alok Kejriwal, CEO and co-founder Games to Win, Mr. Shubham Jha, India Sales Lead, Adjust Platforms, Sharan Tulsiani, Business Development Manager, Google Play India, Viren Charania, Strategic Partner Manager, Google India. Welcome esteemed guests and speakers to episode 3 of Google Game Summit 2020. To kickstart the third episode of Google Game Summit, I want to first acknowledge that we realize for many of you, these are not business as usual days. As all of us continue to adapt to COVID 19 across the globe, we understand that today's landscape is creating new challenges for your business and for yourself. While the challenges for each one of us are unique, we are being impacted in some or other way. And we want you to know that Google and our teams are there for you. You can find more information about how Google is trying to help by reading our blog at blog.google and Think with Google platforms. Let's begin the much awaited episode 3 of Google Game Summit 2020 this year on the live stream. Okay, this is about me. So I love mobile apps. And for last few years, I've been working with a lot of developers to help them with UI UX, design, and marketing strategies. Okay, let's start with knowing what you guys are up to in this lockdown period. Let's have a quick poll on Slido. I would request you guys to open your browser and go to slido.com, key in the today's event called GG1. We have also inserted the event code on our frame. Keep this Slido open throughout the session on your phones or on laptops, as we'll be asking you some fun questions throughout the event today. Slido is only for the polls. You may ask the live questions from your window. You have a chat window right there on your screen. You can ask the live questions on your window, and at end of the session, we'll be answering your queries. Okay, so I'm sure everyone is on Slido. Let's move to our first question, and please go onto the poll screen. Here is the first question on your phones or on your browsers. So what's one thing you are most grateful of during these times? I want your answer. What's the one thing you are most grateful of during these times? Can we move on to see what audience is saying today? We'll stay here for a couple of seconds and we'll see what you're up to. What's one thing you are most grateful of during these times? Personally, I'm grateful of good health, well-being, and ability to work despite being in the lockdown. It's never easy, but I'm amazed how fast we've adapted to the situation. I wish this lockdown ends fast and I'm able to meet all of you in person. Family, wow, certainly yes. Having a job being safe. Health, family time. Few more answers we'll wait. Family stands first for each one of us, and that's pretty much right for all of us. We're grateful that we are with our family, spending time with them. I don't know when was the last time I stayed back at home for so many days. Healthy lifestyle. Or people are thankful and grateful for having an internet. Zoom. PUBG. Knowledge. Wonderful. Great to receive your answers. Family time spent. Got it. We can go back to our main presentation. Okay. So before we begin our session today and invite our first speaker, let me assure you how Google can help you to scale new heights for your businesses. There are various ways Google is trying to help and can support your game development and marketing. We have experts for advising you on game monetization. We can also help you in consults on exports, cost per install benchmarks for top countries. Today's session is all about that. campaign onboarding, and other supports by Google. All you need to do is just listen to the session carefully, and at end of the session, in the feedback form, please leave your numbers and email so that we can get back to you. You can also write to us on 2020gamesummit at google.com if you have any queries from us. Quickly moving on to our first speaker, Mr. Sharan Tulsiani, who is Business Development Manager, Apps and Games for Google Play India. Sharan specializes in mobile gaming growth and IAP monetization across global regions for Google Play. And he carries extensive knowledge on the Indian and global gaming industry, game monetization, and growth consulting. Here you go, Sharan. Here you are live.
All right. Hello. Hi, everybody. And, I'm excited to be here. Aman, thank you for the introduction. I may have met some of you in the past before, but a little bit about myself for those who I haven't met before. I've been in the gaming industry for a while now and have had the pleasure to see the industry in India and the business grow from the PC gaming days to some time console industry, and now the explosion in the mobile business. And I've had the opportunity to, at least I believe, guide some of that growth recently, especially in the mobile space. So what I want to try to do is do a very quick overview for you to get you to start thinking globally, to help those among you who haven't sold global markets. Just note down some very broad guidelines, right? And these guidelines are more about how do you think and how do you approach these markets rather than specifics on what to do with every nuance, because these markets can be very complicated, right? All right, so let me tell you a bit about what's ahead and how I'm going to address this. A lot of what you're going to see is going to be publicly available data and App Annie data. And most of the content, I try to keep it in my notes and I'll be speaking them. So the slides are just broad structures. So please do take notes if you find something interesting. Now, a lot of conversation with developers and publishers I've had over the years creates the impression that when you look at it in isolation, exporting seems easy. And think about it that way: you're exporting it. You're taking your game from your market, you're building it in India, you're taking it to other markets. And it sometimes seems like it should be, right? If you look at the fundamental pillars, what you initially want to do is identify the opportunity, identify the market, right? Then you create a entry strategy, right? You then look at localizing what users see when they visit your apps listing on the Play Store, so they know what to expect, or that's what attracts them in. And finally, you localize and adapt what they play where and when required, right? The actual in-game experience or the language. But there's a lot more to consider, or there's a framework that you should apply when doing each of these. And we'll try to get you to think in that sense by like I said, giving an overview of these markets in that framework, okay? So let's start with a quick look at the most popular market I get asked about, which is the United States. Now, the US market has very deep mobile penetration, right? It's 81% at least of the population has smartphones. We know it has huge gaming presence, no surprise there, estimated 200 million gamers or more. And this is again from publicly available data. It also has a massive market, right? In terms of consumer spend, I believe it's second largest consumer spend market in the world outside in gaming in general across the board, outside of maybe China, right? So very, very attractive as a market. And the top game genres are not incredibly different from what you see in India. There's some significant overlap. So you see a lot of overlap in casual to hardcore games. Casino and card games, such as card battles, slots, and poker, very popular. Strategy and simulation games are very popular. And PvP and Battle Royale have, of course, as you know, Battle Royale probably leads in many well-known and famous IPs that are also either popular here already or gaining popularity. Match 3, bubble shooter are popular definitely, but idle clickers, idle clickers, simple, very short, session-based gameplay games are also have gained traction in the last few years, right? And when I spoke about battle royale, it's not necessarily restricted to just that aspect of action, but even longer-term story-based adventure games uh, are incredibly popular in the US market and generate a lot of revenue and consumer spend for game publishers and game developers. A number of different gaming trends can be seen in the US right now. And it's important to understand that the market in the United States is incredibly diverse. Right? So we see an appetite for not just playing esports, but also streaming esports. So that itself is a very hot genre. Um, but there's also diverse ways to monetize, right? And there's a lot of experimenting that publishers and developers do with ads, IAP, subscriptions. A new trend the last few years definitely has been genre mashing. A lot of innovation that US gamers look at, given that the market is fairly mature, is taking a couple of mature genres and mashing them together. Right? So these are sort of the trends we see in the top genres we see in this market. When when you're and if you're looking at entering the market, um, do localizing across multiple aspects. So it doesn't mean just localizing across a language which is very important, but also understanding how pricing is done, how pricing is presented, and what kind of range of price points work for your genre of games. Right? It's also important to understand that there are significant optimizations that you can make. One of the assumptions that people have of the US market is that everybody's on high end phones, for example. There's a significant opportunity in optimizing across devices like you will for India, right? Where you focus on app size, when you focus on, using different tools like app bundles, where you optimize for multiple screen sizes. Right? These are opportunities that I think a lot of developers miss when they're entering the US market. What I want to talk about though is pricing. Now, pricing can be made more appealing for users. A very common pricing tactic in the United States is using the 0.9 cents rather than a round figure. So, like saying 2.299 rather than $3. Okay, uh, it's surprisingly effective. Subscriptions are becoming a popular way for games also to supplement IAP revenues and drive retention. So, consider ways you can to expand what you're doing on IAP by building in subscriptions for your game or for a specific feature set within your game. Free trials and promo pricing can always encourage users to explore subscriptions because uh, there is a more robust habit of spending, but giving a taste of what users can expect through free trials is a strong mechanic to engage users. Um, and like I said earlier, the US has a very wide range of demographics and income levels. So factor that in when pricing. It's not all just, I think, often when we tend to appear and enter new markets, um, we can try to price a little high. What I would encourage you to do is think about the entire range of income levels in that market and price at multiple levels to try to get users at different spend capacities. Right? Cultural moments when you're building or exporting a game, or you're building or you're trying to do features or live ops for these markets. Think about cultural moments. Diversity in the US means things like Oktoberfest and the Lunar New Year and Diwali and the Women's March and Pride Parade and Islamic New Year are all significant US cultural holidays and events. So make some time by looking at these opportunities to make your title more engaging during seasonal events because it has a chance of boosting your game. It's not just Thanksgiving. There's so much more, right? So that's just a quick overview of the US market. And the pillars on which I think developers should consider or structure their approach. Let's talk about another market. Now, one of the top countries by consumer spends on games actually is the United Kingdom, right? And in terms of consumer spend, casual games were the top performers and showed the greatest growth uh, in the last year or so. Uh, Second place was taken by strategy games, and RPG in the third position. Now we see popular games spread across genders, so male and female. Half of all male and female users play games, and social media is actually a very big acquisition channel. So you can think beyond traditional user acquisition by investing on social media. I'm going to skip. I'm going to move a little faster because I'm being told I'm going slowly. I'll move faster. All right. So when building out for the UK, please consider that you have to localize the language. The UK language versus the US English is different, especially if you're doing a spelling or crossword game. So make sure you adapt for that, but also adapt for cultural nuances. Cricket is popular, but football is known as football over there, not as soccer, which is just in the US. It's also important to remember that the UK is actually 4 countries and not one. Think about local events. Thanksgiving, not celebrated in the UK. And if you have cultural aspects, the tone differs. Think about the US office versus the UK office, right? That's a TV show. If you haven't checked it out, do. To the next market, France. Yes, why France? Well, gaming is also the number one cultural product sold in France, with higher revenues than music, books, and movies. And of course, you have great studios like Ubisoft and Gameloft coming out of France. It has a huge potential. It's the fourth largest market in Europe, deep penetration of smartphones, and it really has a massive scope. Also, anime and Japanese IPs are very popular. When you're building out for France, though, remember to use euros. Language is probably one of the right. So definitely get a local agency, ideally, to kind of uh, customize for you. And YouTube and influencer marketing are actually key strategies for acquisition. There are a lot of other acquisition paths you can use, but social media is definitely very strong. Also, remember when monetizing for France that French users are known to be a little less tolerant of for ads, right? Now, what I'm going to try to do here is move to the next market, right? Exporting to Japan. Now, Japan is a very large market, 36 million gamers out of 100 million mobile phone users. Localization is incredibly important because apps that are available or games that are available only in English are seen as foreign, right? So, as such, these games tend to be very niche and have fewer opportunities. It's a highly sophisticated market. So, when you're exporting, please make sure that you are customizing as much as possible, right? Action and role playing are very popular. And remember, nuances and quality is super important in Japan. It's highly mature when it comes to gaming. Uh, so, like I said, make sure you get the best possible translation and polish it. Try to build out the UI a little more customizable because the Japanese language requires some more work. So I would suggest you look at Japan only after you've probably customized for some easier markets. At the same time, it does have a very high average consumer spend on gaming, right? Uh, Skipping ahead. All right. Uh, let's look at Russia. Now, a lot of people don't talk about Russia because they're not aware of it. But if you think about it, it's the biggest country in Central Eastern Europe and one of the biggest mobile markets in EMEA. It has massive potential with well over 65 million gamers, and the spending potential, according to Newzoo, is over 1.7 billion of annual spend. So look at what other companies have successfully been able to crack in the market. Strategy is one of the probably the biggest genres that have been significantly and successfully localized in Russia. And at the same time, RPG and action games are incredibly popular. And finally, localize. Russia uses rubles. Get your monetization right because you can go at a lower price point, but also account for the 20% VAT that you have to pay in your earnings. Translation again is key. I would say ensure consistency when using a formal versus informal tone. And remember that some fonts, when you customize your game, some fonts might actually break when trying to use that script. So there are issues that we've seen with developers. Another easy cultural shift is trying to use Russian character names instead of English. This does help. And finally, and this is the last point, I'll hand off to the next speaker very soon, but social media promotions on local networks is quite important because Russia has significant local networks and channels that a lot of gamers acquire game knowledge from. So look into localization both in terms of the game itself, but also your acquisition channels when looking at the Russian market. All right, that's time for me. I'm going to hand over to Aman, and thank you. I hope this has been useful.
Okay, thank you so much, Sharon, for insightful session. We clearly know that the session is about going global and still thinking local. And we know that US, UK, France, Russia, Japan, these are the markets to go after. So today, in all of our sessions, we'll be talking about the key markets and how to export there. With this, I would love to invite our dear friend Vinay Charania, strategic partner manager from Google AdMob. Vinay works on the monetization side of the business, specializes the monetization solutions for the games, and extensive knowledge on casual games and board games in particular. Here you go, Vinay. Over to you.
Thanks, Aman. Thank you for the introduction. I welcome all of you to the session on monetization for export users. I am the second speaker for today, or as considering Alok's popularity on this forum, I am you're two speakers away from hearing him speak now. But we'll talk about what I'm going to cover today. We're going to talk about specifically on how some of these yeah, we're going to talk about how we'll be. I'm so sorry. There's a slight issue in my screen, which is I was just stopping off. But I'll begin off now. We'll cover a few basics of ad monetization, and then we'll move on to why you should be looking to target non-India users, and finally we'll talk about a few points how you can how you can well monetize them to the fullest. Uh, Speaking of, let's look at some interesting data points. Let's look at some of the top gaming studios that are based out of India. What do you think that their user base would be like? They would have a very high percentage of India users. That's true. And hence a very high amount of ad impressions come out from India. However, even though the number of users are very high, the kind of revenue that comes into these markets from India users is actually, or the kind of revenue that comes into these app developers from the India market is actually quite low as compared to some of the other developed countries. Look at a country like the United States with fairly low impressions, they are able to provide a significantly high amount of revenue to these app developers, which means if, let's say, even if 10% of your user base is from the US, it could actually lead to almost 30 to 40 or even 50% of your total ad revenues coming from the United States, which is why it's extremely important for you to diversify your revenues, diversify your country base, and hence be able to maximize your user base to the fullest. Now let's go on to understanding how these top gaming studios have actually realized that higher value of export users. So they are focusing on developing games for India, but building them not just for India, but also for the world, especially for the developed markets. This is not to say that we don't build games for the India market, but rather we are just trying to say that let's not get restricted by it. So how do we monetize our export users? Let us just cover some basics of ad monetization before we deep dive into monetizing for export users. So the single most important aspect for your ad monetization strategy is to have the right ads platform partner for your games. If you'd ask me, this is my experience, what would be the ideal ads platform partner that you require? It would be someone that requires very less manual inputs or resources, is automated, and thus gives you a lot of flexibility with respect to the time that you're spending on that ads platform. And the second part would be that it gives you sufficient demand for the inventory that you're having on your apps, which means that if there are peaks and troughs in the advertising demand in the market, this particular ads platform is able to cover for that and provide you ads at all points of time. Let's do a quick poll right now. I'm going to talk about Google's ads monetization platform, but let's try to see how many apps across the world would actually be using AdMob. You can go in on Slido.com, enter the code of GG1, and I would love to see how many apps you think are actually on or using Google's AdMob platform. Can we have the slide with the results coming in? Right, so a lot of you think it's 1 million plus users who are on Google's AdMob. Some of you are thinking it's 50,000. We'll wait for a couple of more responses before we go on to revealing what exactly is the number. Great. So that's about 80% of you saying that AdMob has 1 million plus apps. Well, that's correct. That's actually the correct answer. Thanks everyone for sharing it. Love the spirit of sharing these responses. 1 million plus is the number of apps that are there on Google's AdMob, and hence it's a massive ads platform network. We have close to around 1 million plus advertisers also on AdMob, and we can go back to the slides now. Yeah, thanks. So we have 1 million plus apps who are using AdMob. There are also 1 million plus advertisers that are using AdMob. Essentially, Google's AdMob and Google's mediation platform on AdMob is an extensively and widely used platform across the world. And it's not just you who will be using this platform. The top gaming studios across the world, right from studios in Europe, in APAC, in Americas, as well as the top gaming studios in India, all of them are using Google's AdMob and AdMob mediation platform. So among the reasons that you would select AdMob as a platform would be the availability of premium ad formats and also AdMob's mediation, specifically open bidding. Let me explain. So in terms of premium ad formats, we always know that banners and interstitials are formats that give us good CPMs. However, if you have premium ad formats like rewarded and native integrated in your game, these are ad formats that will give you significantly high amount of revenue. And you should be using multiple ad networks for your mediation platform. So AdMob supports 30 plus ad networks on its platform. And open bidding solution, the mediation platform solution by Google, something that provides you the highest CPM for every impression. This is a real-time auction. A good example of a partner who's using open bidding is Ludo King. All of you would have played the game. Ludo King has been using open bidding for the past 1 year, and they've seen massive improvements in their revenue that has come in from ads. They've had about 35% higher CPMs because of Google's open bidding solution. Right, now that we've covered a few basics of ad monetization, let us understand the potential of that these export users offer. Look at these charts now. These charts clearly show that the ad monetization potential, or CPMs, for certain user markets is so much higher than India. I would tie this data back to the one shared in the beginning of the presentation. We can see clearly that you may have a small proportion of your user base from the US or other developed markets, but their contribution to the overall revenue is considerably higher, as can be seen in these charts over there. The India potential or the India CPM values would be very low as compared to some from, let's say, the top tier 1 markets like the US, UK, and Canada. A very quick poll again. How many of the users in India and the US would have spent on IAP in 2019? So the first number is for the US and the second number is for India. You can again go to slido.com, enter the code GG1, and we can quickly have some of the responses that you're sharing. The question is, how many users, according to you, in India in US and in India would have spent on IAP in 2019? Can we have the slide with the answers? Yeah, we're just trying to understand how much potential India and US has with respect to IAP. Clearly, US has 10 billion spends over in 2019. We're trying to understand what happens for India. A lot of you have said it's 120 million, 1 billion. All right, we'll move ahead. It's a mix between. All right, 120 million is clearly going ahead. 120 million is actually, and you can come back to the slides, please. 120 million is actually the right answer, which clearly shows that not just is the ads potential for US and other markets very high, even the IAP potential of some of these user markets is extremely high as compared to the India users. Now let me cover the three pillars that I think are important for you to unlock the maximum revenue of export users. The first bit is the successful integration of rewarded ads in your games. Now, we all know that rewarded ads are extremely popular, and they are something that users can opt in to watch for earning rewards. And since they're opt-in, they actually provide a better user experience for your users. The benefits that come in with rewarded ads essentially are about earning coins, gems, currencies, and then they also help in keeping the user engaged. In fact, even for India, let's say the number of rewarded ads that we see or the contribution that we've seen from rewarded ads in the overall revenue has been quite high. I'll move a little quickly, keeping the time in check, but just some of the other points for rewarded in gaming. As you can see, I've compared on the left-hand side the numbers for rewarded ads as a format versus some of the other formats in the same market. And as you can see, the market for India, for Spanish-speaking, as well as the US, UK, and Australia, Canada markets, the potential of rewarded ads versus some of the other ad formats is significantly higher. So the delta keeps on increasing as you go down. On the right-hand side, the chart that you're seeing is essentially the CPM of rewarded ads for India users versus the rest of the world. Here again, we are seeing very clearly that the potential for rewarded ads and the CPM value of rewarded ads is significantly higher for some of the other markets as compared to for India. I would lastly say that the key to actually monetizing your game successfully is having a hybrid monetization strategy of having IAP as well as ads on your games so that you can maximize your revenue. The next pillar that I would want to talk about is investing in analytics infrastructure. It's extremely critical that you know your numbers well. You know your data by user countries, you know your DAUs, you know your D1, D2, D7, D30 retention, and finally your ARPDAUs and your RPQs. You need to keep testing. You need to test a lot. You need to have A/B tests done for every new placement, every new feature added on your game, and evaluate the impact on ARPDAU as well as retention. And you need to have a good analytics partner that you are using on your apps that will help you do these A/B tests as well as remote configs. And finally, the most important part of this entire exercise, you need to measure your net profitability. You cannot just measure downloads, your DAUs, your user base. You need to know how much are you earning from IAP, how much are you earning from ads, and hence what's the net profitability that you're having for different cohorts. The last pillar that I want to cover is customization. It's extremely critical, and Sharan touched about this point in his presentation also. It's extremely critical that you customize your apps and basis the user country. You evaluate the user countries with high ads per user, like SEA, LATAM, or Middle East versus top tier markets, and ensure that you serve more ads in those markets as compared to some of the other geographies. You can also customize your experience by your purchasers and non-purchasers. And finally, you need to customize your IAP basis the user country. I'll thus summarize now. And the 5 points that I want to summarize this entire presentation by is: number one, build games for the world, not just for India. Use AdMob's mediation platform to get the maximum value from all your ad networks. Utilize rewarded ads to unlock the highest value from users. Invest in analytics to scale fast. Only then do you know your LTV and CPI numbers. And finally, to customize your games so that you can earn not just quickly, but you also earn smartly by the different user markets. With this, I would like to conclude my presentation. I would again call Aman on screen to take you forward, to take this session forward. Thank you again for being a good audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vinay, for such an insightful session. Clearly, you said there is no progress without analytics and measurement. And that brings me to the next section of ours on measurement. We've got Shubham Jha from Adjust, and he would be talking about the measurement and statistics from different countries and how to export there. Shubham comes from Adjust. Shubham specializes in providing attribution solutions to the sophisticated clients, and he's got extensive knowledge on marketing and data analytics. With this, I'll also like to request the audience to post their questions on your screen. In the last 20 minutes, we have a panel and we'll be answering the top 15, 20 questions which you will ask today. So I encourage each one of you to continue asking questions on the session. Here you go, Shubham.
Hey, Aman, thank you so much for giving this opportunity. So, for everyone, my name is Shubham. I take care of India sales business for Adjust. Adjust is a mobile intelligence platform. Brands uses a platform for user acquisition, retargeting, automation, fraud protection, and insight. Uh, Moving forward, if you see, these are the few clients who have been leveraging our platform specifically from gaming industry. So anything from Nintendo to Nantec to Play Simple to Gameberry, they all have been leveraging our platform. Uh, Moving forward, so today I'll be talking about these tier one markets. There are also small markets highly correlated to these, like Canada to United States, Taiwan to Japan. uh, Education and learning should be your key takeaways, right? Moving forward, Japan is third largest market when it comes to market size. It poses a huge opportunity for game development companies. Vast majority of players prefer to watch ads while playing game, so monetization needs to be focused on hybrid IAP and ads, right? Play Store ratings can help you increase your monthly active users. Puzzle is most preferred category amongst uh, game players. Just a sec. This, just a sec, guys. Yeah, just move it. Right. Move next. On If you see, customer loyalty is expected in Japan. They would rather pay more to ensure same quality service. My thing would be focus on retention to capture this market. Next, Japan. So you need to put everything at heart in this market. Companies that have succeeded in Japan, such as Uber Eats and Spotify, have entered the market thanks to fully localized branding and experience. Work extensively on localization. Important to have translation of your app in Japanese. And quickly summarizing about whole of Japan, uh, you should focus on hybrid monetization, localization, and the key soft market should be Taiwan. Moving forward with the next market, next, it's South Korea, right? South Korea has small consumer base but a high spending power, very similar to Japan in user behavior, right? Next, can we go next slide? Okay, high Play Store rating get good traction. Focus on user acquisition campaign is required in Korea. Next, can we go next? Targeting Android users can increase ROI. Key metrics to follow is session per user in 90 days cohort time frame, right? Next, can we go to the next slide? Market strategy. So when you are in Korea, I would say South Korea, ride the Korean ways. Korea is extremely proud of its own culture, and market should make sure they are completely familiar with country's trends and tradition before launch. In Korea, localization takes a new meaning altogether, right? It's not enough just to translate the app. To see the real results, invest in deeper approach of localization and research content trends and preferences, not only in country but different regions and cities in this country. Uh, let's move on to the much mature side of the world, which is like West. Uh, if you see, the next is United States. USA has one of the largest base of mobile gamers today. Players seek value, and it's quick to convert retained users, right? Interestingly, female has a dominant share amongst mobile gamers, which reflect even on top categories like cards, puzzle, words, and casino. Right? In this competitive market, retargeting should be a major part of your growth strategy to keep users engaged. Android and iOS both should be part of your user acquisition strategy. US is such an engaged and lucrative market. Mobile marketers must consider how to push their product through gaming partnerships. Women are 79% more likely to make in-app purchases than men, right? Couple of key takeaway: content is king. Choose your video ad over any other, right? That can significantly increase your CTRs and conversion. Soft launch market, I would say prefer Canada as a soft launch market. Moving on to US to United Kingdom, users have in United Kingdom users have high purchasing power, and half of the users play game at least once a day. Right. Average session time in United Kingdom is 40 minutes, wherein if you see to the other markets, it's somewhere around 60 minutes. So make sure you use the time in the best possible way. And hyper casual games have highest demand, right, in United Kingdom. This market has low retained users. However, focus should be on user engagement and increasing LTV, right, with multiple sessions. Enjoyment, relaxation, mind exercise should be a part of your communication strategy. And prefer Ireland as a soft launch market, right? From these markets, let's move on to the app lifecycle and see what strategies we can have in different stage of app lifecycle. Before we hit that, in my experience, I see a lot of clients needs to focus on three things: ensure higher number of users to do better analysis, having defined TG within a specific time frame, keeping, and third would be keeping ROI projection handy, right? When you're doing a soft launch, few things to keep in mind. First thing is time frame. It should at least be 2 to 3 months, so you have good number of data to analyze. Launch in market who has a high correlation to the mature markets, like use Taiwan for Japan, use Canada for USA. Then your DAO should be significant to get a meaningful cohort, right? Four metrics to keep in mind is CVR, also known as CTR, click-through rate, average revenue per daily active users, average revenue per paying users. Also measure your retention and monetize your digital property well. From this, moving on to the next stage of the growth, which is growth itself, right? At this stage, I would recommend to hit the floor. Measure channels not only in terms of install, but also post-install metrics, such as average session per user, retained user on D1, D7, D14, then D28 or 30, average revenue per user, and your ROS, average revenue per user, and ROS should be anywhere upwards of 10% on D7. Specific to categories, hyper casual gaming should focus more on multiple session. Casual should focus on higher retention, and mid-hardcore may see low retention, but you should focus on revenue per daily active users, right? Moving on to the the next phase is maturity. All the metrics of other phases should be measured. Life operation needs to be done in this stage. Weightage of retargeting. Remember, weightage of your retargeting should at least be 30% of your growth strategy mix, right? The key KPIs you should look for is conversion rates. Make sure your average revenue per daily active users and average revenue per paying users are stable, right? And this brings us to the end. Thank you so much for hearing me out. I feel that it must have brought some value, right? If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer after this. And then you can also reach me out directly on shubham@adjust.com. Uh, to move forward, I'd like to call Aman.
Thank you so much, Shubham. And with this, we come on to our next session with our celebrity guest today, Mr. Alok Kejriwal. Mr. Alok Kejriwal is a well-known author, entrepreneur, and a game developer. And Alok runs a gaming studio named Games to Win and specializes in, I would say, if I say one thing he specializes in, it will be foolish of me. He specializes in many things. I've attended his yoga sessions. I have attended sessions with Sri Ravi Shankar and him on Art of Living. Other than that, he specializes in gaming across Asia and global regions and extensive knowledge on user monetization and acquisitions. Over to you, Mr. Alok Kejriwal.
Nice to see everyone, and great to be on a gaming panel. So let's talk about the whole business of mobile games. I think of it as an opportunity of a lifetime, right? I mean, we get one life, and mobile exports. I mean, gaming itself is a phenomenal business to be, and if you can just put a little spin on your business and create an export kind of momentum, it can be really amazing. So let's move on. We're in a gaming panel, right? So let's play a game. What else can we do? So what I want you to do is look at the next slide very carefully. This is a chart of mobile game downloads. Some Unity data, doesn't matter when it came from or how relevant it is recent. And it just lists the countries in terms of most downloads. So just look at this chart. Yeah. It's not a very tricky question, don't worry. And now I want you to go to Slido. You've already done that in the previous session. So if you need a revision, go to slido.com, click on the, enter your event code GD1. This is GD1, Game Developer 1, and just enter a number, whatever you think. How many countries did you see on that chart? Let's see some numbers. We're getting 8, we're getting 10. Okay. Should we wait for some more, or? Okay. It doesn't have to be you don't have to rack your head, guys. Whatever you saw is, the first number that comes to your mind is what you should write. Awesome. Yeah, people are pretty observant, I must say. We're not getting the low numbers, so I'm intrigued by 6, 10, 12, 13. I think I've already made my point. Let's wait for a couple of more seconds. Okay, great. Can we go to the results slide, please? I remember 3. I like that. I like it. Okay. You remember 3, really? Okay. Okay, so I'm going to come back now. And the question was, how many countries did you see? A lot of you got it right, and the answer is 10. So what is this? Was Alok trying to play a arithmetic quiz with you and saying, okay, guys, forget gaming now, let's start understanding whether you can count? It's not at all that. The point is, India is just one of the top 10 countries in the world with mobile downloads. That's the point. We don't have to be so, we don't have to have a tunnel vision, and we don't have to have blinkers on and saying, oh, India, India, India. Yeah, sure, India is the country that has the highest downloads, but there are 9 more countries, and you don't have to ignore them. So there is a large potential to get downloads in many more markets versus just an India. And guys, before I get some big messages saying you're not a bhakt and you're not a India follow. I love my country. I'm just a businessman and I'm presenting a point of view. So let's do another quiz. Okay, let's do another game. I mean, we got to get some energy in this session, right? Now this is another simple question. Need you to think a little bit. Don't have to be accurate. 80% of all books on Amazon sell how many copies on an average? What do you think? So go back to let's go back to Slido, and now you have a multiple choice. You don't have to be that accurate, and just put in your number. Remember that Amazon.com is the largest bookseller in the world. So everyone who writes a book has to be on Amazon, including me, and we all get our share of sales. The question is, how many copies does an average book sell? Yep. If you can see the Slido results. Yep, we're getting some momentum. Only 1,000, really? Come on, man. How can you be a good author if you sell only 1,000? If you had some of the best Indian authors here, they'd be like grimacing, Okay. And I think people are pessimists here. They don't want to sell more than 1,000 copies. Yeah, come on, guys. Let's put some. Let's get some enthusiasm here, right? Okay, nice. So it's a very interesting kind of chart here. I'm seeing 1,000, which is still dominating the charts, but you've got 10,000 and 100,000. Okay, let's go back. Let's actually review the results, and the answer is 1,000 copies. So no matter whether I was trying to deceive you or not, less than 1,000 copies sell on an average for every book sold. So what are we trying to do? Are we trying to evaluate the ROI of a book's business? We're not. We're trying to get to a much bigger point, and this is the point. It's the concept of the long tail. Now it's, I don't know whether you have a pet and whether the pet's tail looks like this or not. I don't, unfortunately. But here's a great example of what the long tail means. And I'm not saying you got to now go and get dogs with long tails. I'm simply saying you have to understand a profound, phenomenal, deep business concept, commonly called the long tail. And what does it mean? What does it do? It's very simple. There is a short head and there's a long tail. Any business or any category can be divided like this. Think about it, right? You've got some great 5-star hotels, but you got a chain of small hotels. You've got, some great restaurants, but you've got a Udupi and South Indian restaurants all over the country. Those are the long tail. Now, how does it apply to us? What's the big deal? What do I make out of a long tail? This is the interpretation for games. So it's a choice you can make, right? If you want to compete at the short head, you can go for top games, which are very rich in LTV. The kind of games that get onto these Google, they'll get you on a thumbnail for sure, but they're very hard to compete with, very hard to earn money from. My proposal is work with niche games. Now, what are niche games? Niche games are, infinitely consumable. They may not have so much of competition. You may have low consumers for some of the games, but having said that, it's fine. You don't have to be worried about a very large kind of, you don't have to be stressed about selling too many, trying to make a great title and attracting too many consumers for it. So this is the concept of the long tail, and read about it because a lot has been documented about it. This is what I was trying to say. So niche versus top games. So the simple takeaway is there's a game for everyone to play in the world. And I think the statistic may not be true, but I heard in a conference once that every game on the App Store gets downloaded. Now, I'm not saying you make a game that gets 3 downloads in a year, but there's an opportunity to be a long tail player. It doesn't have to be a hit game, boss. You don't have to be crazy about making hits. And it doesn't have to be a single game. So that's the strategy of the long tail. A game for everyone, doesn't have to be a hit, and it can be many. Yeah. Now let's talk about, I talked about hits, right? And this is a very favorite topic. We all love hits. We all reference hits. We all talk about the biggest, the best, the greatest. Okay. So how do you make this? How do you make a hit? Yeah. You remember this guy? We all do, right? I mean, if you're watching in India, it's undoubtedly, I would not believe that you haven't heard of Sholay or haven't seen Gabbar Singh. All the mothers in North India at least would frighten their children to drink milk by saying Gabbar Singh aa jayega, means Gabbar Singh will come and take you away if you don't drink your milk. So that's iconic, right? You can't get bigger than Sholay and Gabbar Singh. So I had a very profound moment with the creator of this IP. And when I met Ramesh Sippy, who's the director of Sholay, I asked him a question. So how did you make Sholay? I mean, come on, right? We want to all know how to make great hits. And his answer was stunning. And this is what he said. So if the creator of the greatest IP in the world doesn't know how to make it, no one knows. And that's the point. In the business of games, I'm sure you know who this guy is. If you don't, the creator of Pokemon, I love what he said. It takes 20 years to become an overnight success. Yeah. So that's if you want to be an overnight success, you'll have to spend 20 years doing it, which is the same thing as, not knowing. We are one of the greatest games of all, Angry Birds, 51 attempts before they made it big. So what's the lesson and what's the moral of the story? The learning is very simple. No one knows how to make hits. No one. And if you still don't believe me, go up to Google and read about this phenomenal bet that Steven Spielberg and George Lucas had. It's such an amazing, truthful incident. You will not believe how each of them could not believe what they were making and actually bet against each other. So read it up. So we don't know how to make great hits, but we all know how to make some misses. And that's the business of games, right? You don't have to focus on a hit. You have to focus on getting a good game out. Yeah, some will fail, some will work, but it's a process of reiteration and getting it right. So my story, and I think earlier when I was in chat with the Google team, they said, "Alok, talk about your story. We've got enough gyan and knowledge. You talk about what you've done." So this is what I did. And there's a learning in that. So when I started this company, I looked around me and what were my kids playing with? I have 2 girls. So, they were playing primarily with dolls. I used to play with toy cars. I still have a lot of toy cars if you come and meet me in my office. And I read a lot of comics, Archie's and Asterix and Richie Rich. And that was the idea, right? So the point is, you don't have to go ballistic. You don't have to be a nuclear scientist to figure out what to make. It's what you observe. 2 of the greatest investors that I've followed in my lifetime, Peter Lynch. Peter Lynch said, look up Peter Lynch, McGallen, and he said, I buy what my wife buys. He used to go with her in the supermarket and just look at what she shops on. So some of the greatest insights don't have to come from some extraordinary, they come from observation. And I just observed these things. And my reaction was, hey, you know what? I said, let's make car, doll, and story games on mobile. Now, that's the way it is. You don't have to complicate things. While we don't like, let me rephrase it. While Donald Trump is a very controversial character, he was in India about 8 years ago, before he became president, inaugurating one of his residential buildings in Bombay. And he kept saying something which I could not understand. It probably took me a year or 2 to understand. And his one constant, reminder was, don't try too hard. Don't try too hard. I just couldn't understand what this guy was saying. And this is what he was saying. Observe, ingest, use some common sense, Go after it. So if you're a game developer or publisher, don't get stressed, boss. You don't have to have some. There is a game for everyone to play, and you can find it if you just start observing things. Yeah, good. So what happened with my idea? When I started Games to Win, and it's become one of the largest gaming studios in the world. This is a it's very nice to say these data points, but we just got carried on. We just got covered on App Annie, yes, as one of the largest game downloaded studios from the Asia region. I was very happy to see that we've even gone above Halfbrick, which was I think mentioned in the session here today. The makers of Fruit Ninja and so on and so forth. So we are large. We've got some titles out there. We got about 310 million downloads. Uh, excuse me. We got 20 crores in profit this financial year that's closed. We're trending towards doubling that right now as we speak. I have no qualms of sharing my financials because they're anyway public in the ROC. And we have an ambition to be an IPO company in India in 2023. Unfortunately, there isn't any company in India, and we want to be one of the first, if not the first. So it's just coming out of that same simple dream of saying, let's make some games, and let's make some car games, doll games, and comic games. So this is how things turn out. And this is a small thumbnail of our titles. So quick, now let's get into the business of this session, right? This is what our downloads look like. And you can already see that it's a really diverse mix of countries, but I want to point out to a few countries for you. Look at the largeness of India. Look at the largeness of Brazil. Now look at the tiny slivers. Like, well, Turkey is still a little larger. Look at the US, right? A little small sliver. It's not the kind of the slice of the pizza you would want to get if we had to split the pizza. And look at France. Look at Germany. Look at UK. Very, very tiny. Teeny mini, chintu mintu, as I call them. So if these are the downloads from these countries, what happens in revenue, right? Obviously, the larger the download, larger the revenue. And that's the whole point. It's absolutely ulta, upside down. So this is what happens in terms of revenue. You remember that small sliver of the US? This is our revenue contribution in our game, in our business from the US, from Germany, from GB, France. And Brazil is still a contributor, okay? It had a large pie, but it's still around there. India is so small. And, Turkey, which was also large, is kind of shrunk. So it doesn't matter if you get too many downloads and you're inundated by lots and lots of users. What's the big deal if you can't make money, boss? Why do you run a business if you're not profitable and minting money, right? Like that Money Heist show on Netflix. Gaming is Money Heist in real life. You should be minting money. And you can wear those red jumpsuits also if you want. So the message is this, and it's my favorite quote from Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice. And the misquoted line is, all that glitters is not gold. But the word glitter was not around in Shakespearean world. It was all that glisters is not gold. Just a little trivia for you, because I'm very touchy about my Shakespeare. Okay, so just one small point for you. So deep dive, So what happened? Like, why did those charts turn out that way? It's very simple. It's in these, the numbers will tell you all. These are the blended CPMs of Games to Win in April. And look at the numbers, right? It is so amazing and so disturbing, or let me say opportunistic, that almost every country in the world has a better CPM than India. GB somehow not in the chart, but there are very few, like Kazakhstan, even that seems to have a better revenue. Iraq and Iran in my business have done worse than India. So every country that I talked about monetizes better than India. So, there is a very large opportunity for you to go outside of India. And the same, trend line is in other markets. It's amazing. I mean, sorry, just want to bring that chart back. The Philippines, Poland, look at Oman. Dude, Ukraine, Thailand monetizes better than India. So why are we so fixated about just being in one country? So what did we do to succeed in exports? Now, one disclaimer: I was worked in a socks factory for 9 years, and I learned a lot of exports there. Actually, I pioneered exports of socks from India. But if you're saying, Alok, did you learn how to export socks and you learned how to export mobile games? Unfortunately, there's no correlation. I wish there was. I'd have been much ahead of my time. So what do we do, right? Deep localization. It's very simple. You just got to natively translate your games into 26 languages. We do 26 languages when we ship. We don't do them afterwards. When we ship, 26 languages natively translated. What is native? A person of that country has translated the game, not some guy who's done some language course who's pretending to know, Romanian. A deep study of local content. Obviously, I think Sharon talked a lot about that. Everybody talked about that. And even understanding how app stores behave, right? So what does it mean? Let me show you. For the US, we have a deep good leadership in the US on our driving games. We studied every road sign of the US and gamified it. So we have 140 road signs specifically of the US that we've converted into 140 levels in our driving games. You don't get that anywhere else, and that's why that game is so popular. If you look at cars, I think one spoke about Russia. We look at Russian cars, we study them, and then we adapt them for our game. So if you're playing a driving game of Games to Win in Russia, you will get Russian cars to play with. My favorite example, right? The Middle East. It's a beautiful market, such a unique market, such a deep culture. They have their own, they have their own dignity. And why should gaming not preserve and glorify that dignity, right? So this is our entire suite of fashion games for the Middle Eastern market, and we took a lot of care and love to kind of craft these levels in our dress up games. And what happens, right? If you respect a market, you get consumers who love you and respond back. So this is the player delight. Girls so happily talking about the fact that there is a game that she can actually play that responds to her cultural code of conduct. And when you get delight, what do you get? You get top ranks. I want to bring in this important point. Unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know how to put it, we don't have any marketing in our games business right now. So that 20-25 crores of profits have come without any marketing. We hope to change that, but right now we're a pure organic company, and we've done those 300 million downloads by organic. And these are some of the secret sources of organic downloads, paying a lot of attention to all these things. Look at another last example, probably second last example, maybe Decisions, our narrative game. 2 million words have been translated for Decisions. Now, 2 million words is a lot. Let me tell you, I'm a writer, and I've just written my second book. A good book has 45,000 words, and Decisions has 2 million words. So it's like writing 50 books by one guy. Impossible. And this is what we've done to make this game global and loved by so many players in the world. Look at regionalization of UI UX. Even the thumbnails have a story, right? So for one of our driving games, and this is really funny, if someone can tell me why this happened, I'd love to know. If you look at the left icon, this is what works really well in the Western market, a car that's stopping in front of a train. But in the Arabic markets, a car that is going to get penalized by a speed camera is what works better. Now, no one knows, boss. Only Google knows. So put your thumbnails on A/B testing, do experiments on the console, and let the algorithm win. The lesson is just keep on trying different things in different markets because they really work. So finally, how do we calculate export opportunity? What's the great ideology? Is there some black box algorithm? This is a banya ka dukan, right? I keep saying this is like a halwai shop. Halwai is a sweet meat dukan. The more you complicate it, the more you'll get puzzled. We have a very simple math. This is the math. So we took a game called Decisions. This is we looked at a country in that 10 country chart, and we said, okay, let's take a country that we like. Let's choose a random country. So we chose Indonesia. So we selected one of those 10 countries. Of course, we selected it because it has CPMs, right? There's a focus on CPMs because that's how we make money. Excuse me. Now, how do you measure whether something is worth doing or not? ROI, return on investment, the best 3-letter word ever invented by man. Okay, if you have a better word, tell me. It's not CPC, it's not CPA, it's not CTR, it is ROI. Okay, that's an accountant speaking. So what is the ROI on a game like Decisions? We looked at our revenue from Indonesia. Okay, so we're making something like $2,000 a month. If we convert our Decisions game to Indonesian, what will happen? This is what it's going to cost us. So the game has 40,000 stories, words per story, like a book. It has 20 stories, so 800,000 words. If you translate it using a native translator, it'll cost you $16,000, which is 10 lakh rupees. But if you're going to get $2,000 a month from it, it's break even in 8 months. No stock in the world. Warren Buffett can't give you break even in 8 months, boss. So gaming is king. So we go ahead, and the decision is, let's go for it. So that's a simple ROI. Look at the countries, look at the revenue, look at your cost of going into that country, and go ahead or don't go ahead. If I'd done this for India and I'd done it for regionalization and making all the languages, it would have been a complete disaster. That's why you don't see an Indian conversion here. Finally, we invest a lot in team diversity. We've probably got the largest girls teams in our company, and we hire a lot of makeup specialists, fashion stylists. These are the people who run our fashion games. We have automobile designers and automobile specialists who run our car games. So it's not Alok who's designing the dresses or turning around the RPM in a car. It's an automobile designer. So we invest in diversity and skills, and that's what makes your company great. So the summary is very simple. We're in the right business at the right time. It can't get better. Unfortunately, it's a bad time in the world, but gaming is a good business to be in. There's a market for everyone. The global markets are bigger and lucrative. Don't chase hits, chase improvement. Kaizen, Kaizen, Kaizen. Understand that word. This is an important one. Localize deep, then think, then go wide. Don't go wide and look and be thin. Calculate ROI. Remember, there's a small imaginary pencil behind your ear, like you see in those Hindi movies with the accountant. That's the kind of pencil you should always keep. If you don't have a pencil, hang one in your ear, then you'll understand ROI all the time. Just joking. And analytics, right? I mean, everything that moves has to be measured. That's simple. Look, this is a personal view. We don't care about degrees and which college you came from. We want enthusiasm and passion, and that's what we hire for, which is how we've been able to get a very diverse team in place. We like people who don't do well in college because they try harder. Connect with me. If you're on the internet and I'm on the internet, we can connect. So you won't find it hard to find me. Yep. Thank you so much, and thank you, Aman. And over to you.
Thank you so much, Alok. I'm really always amazed at how simplistically you put things forward, and I'm like, every time I meet you, I think that wish we had more time with you. Thank you so very much for explaining so simplistically the concept of ROI, the concept of design, and how keeping globalization in mind, one need to think local, think of a particular market before moving ahead. And the lesson for the day is ROI. And you rightly said, Alok, the best 3-letter word ever been invented is ROI. I'll keep that in mind. Okay, so we move next. You guys will have a feedback form right up there on your screen. Hope for all of you game developers and marketers, the session was insightful. We'll take live questions now, but I'm sure you are going to implement the suggestions to improve your consumer experience. I would request to each one of you to please fill up the feedback survey. The survey is right up there on your screen. We'll pause here for a minute so that you can fill up the survey, and then we move on to our panelists for the live questions. You can fill up the survey right from your screen, or you can fill up the survey by clicking on or writing the bit.ly URL displayed on your screen. So the survey form is right up. Please leave your contact number and email details on the feedback form so that Google Teams can reach out to you for more one-on-one consultation. All speakers are here for the live questions. I'll take a pause for a minute. We'll allow you to fill up the form, and then we go on to live questions. We have got a couple of live questions from the audience. We'll go on to the live questions just in a minute. Okay, while you fill up the feedback form, let's see what's coming up next on the next Friday, which is 29th of May. We'll have co-founder from Ludo King, Mr. Vikash Jaiswal, and he'll be talking about how he built, for India, the game called Ludo King, which has got about 150 million monthly actives now, and I'm sure that each one of you are playing that game in your families. You'll have Purnima coming in from Zynga. Purnima is the lead game designer from Zynga. She'll talk about the game design and understanding the gaming mindset. And we'll also have Mr. Siddharth Jain, a CEO and co-founder of one of the biggest gaming studios in the country called Play Simple Games. With this, I'm sure that you guys are busy in filling up the feedback form, but we'll continue the session with questions and answers. We move next to our panelists. Please type your questions onto your screen in the chat window. We'll continue to take live questions for another 20-25 minutes. Can we have all the panelists, please? Okay, we'll wait for the questions to come in. Okay, the first question is from Mr. Alok. Alok, the question is, how did you think of going global? Was it a planned effort over time?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. Actually, when I started Games to Win, I took 3 vows, swears, and the first vow was VOW, okay, not wow, but VOW. And the first vow I took was I will not do any business only for India. This was because of my prior companies. I'd learned that in India, everything happens 10, 20 years later. So that was one. The other one was I'll build for India, from India, but not for, so I'll use India as my base. And the third was I'll not engage with brands. I was done with doing brands. So yeah, it was a very premeditated effort. And from day one, we began to look at, how do we reach out to global consumers? And we were a flash gaming business then. So it wasn't something that happened accidentally. It was very, very planned.
Yeah. Okay, can we have the next question, please? Yeah. Okay, the next question is for Vinay. Vinay, what do you advise top AdMob publishers? How do you think the broader ecosystem can learn from them?
I think the advice for top AdMob publishers, or for that matter, any publisher who's out there, would be to look at diversification of revenue. Do not rely on only one aspect. Do not rely, let's say, only on ads or only on IAP. Try to look at a hybrid monetization solution for your game or for your app. And the similar concept would apply to the user countries that you have. Like I think Alok has put it brilliantly in his presentation also. You can be based out of India. You can use India as the base, but don't get restricted by it because there is a lot of value outside, and the entry barrier is not that high. Yeah, that's what I would want to share.
Thank you so much, Vinay, for answering that question. Sharon, the question is to you. You have worked extensively with the top gaming players. What segregates these companies from the indies, and how can we learn from them? Sharon, I think your audio is in a... Sharon, your audio is in a mute, I guess.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you can.
I apologize. I'm using 2 monitors. It looks very cool, but it also means that I don't know where my mouse is half the time. All right. So I think this is a really interesting question. There is a lot to it. There's a lot to unpack. If it's difficult to specify. But let's talk about what I find stands out the most, and that is two things. One is a commitment and dedication to analytics. Right. What I mean by that, it's not somebody's part-time job to study the data across the board, but there is a professional, where possible, committing. And even companies that I've seen or worked with, and I've seen them grow, say, over the last 4 or 5 years, um, there's always a founder who has a passion for numbers. And if you want to see a passion for numbers, have a 20-minute chat with Alok any data. It will bring out more than you expect from the data that you presented. So that's what I mean by passion for numbers. And the second is discipline in implementing analytics. These are two things.
Got it. And Alok, you often talk about the 9 jewels report you have and how
Yep.
your company does analytics. I'm like completely amazed by that. Every day you read about 9+ reports and maybe more. Would you please talk about analytics a bit before we move on to the next question?
Sure. So as Sharan said, analytics is it. Now here's the thing with numbers, right? Unfortunately, I think in our country, I'm not taking a personal jab, but I'm stating a fact. We've grown up with a little bit of a love-hate relationship with math. A lot of people kind of get scared with maths. When I throw up a Google sheet with lots and lots of rows and lots of columns, the first reaction is revulsion. So if I show you a picture, or if I show you an Excel sheet, what will you choose? A picture or an Instagram post. Now the challenge is to go beyond that. So how do you turn revulsion into love? You make the Google sheet look like Instagram. So visualization of data is the first thing that you can do in your company to help make those numbers look pretty. Charts always look better than numbers. Imagine a Google console with numbers in them, right? We'll go crazy. Like I'll lose all my hair. So visualize. The other thing is, I heard this many years ago in a conference in Austin. Only measure what you can change. So look, we can measure 100,000 things at one given time, boss. But what's the use of measuring it as long as you can't change it? So take 10 things that you can measure. For example, I'll quickly walk through funnel, right? What the hell is going on in your funnel? What's going on in all the UX in your game, and so on and so forth. So I'm writing I'm opening up these 9 jewels. The first one's already out there. I'll hopefully write a video, record the rest, and it's all open for public consumption. And there's a lot of stuff. I mean, the Google Play Academy is phenomenal if you want to learn. By the way, Google Analytics, I'm always halfway through the Analytics Academy on Google Analytics. That's profound. So if you commit yourself to analytics, you'll win. If you don't, then, even God won't like you. Even God studies analytics 3 hours a day. He told me that.
Got it. Thank you so much for taking that, Alok. Other one, again, people want to know more about export markets. The question is to you again. There's a specific ask for German markets,
Sure.
and people
Sure.
want to know that how casual games are doing in German market. What strategy do you adopt for localization?
So there's a very good question, but I want to broaden it and tell you how you can look at every market in the world. I actually wrote Sharan inspired me to write a long blog on the value that the app stores have done for people like us in the gaming world. And quick background is, none of y'all who are listening in, I'm sure, existed in the vast space. But if you existed, then you'd probably be in a hospital by now, because it was so brutal. And in that world, you could not understand who was doing what. Now look at the app world, right? Your question of German market. What will I do? I'll do the following. I'll go to App Annie. I'll go to top charts. I'll go to Germany. I'll go to games. I'll look at top free. You will get the entire list of top free games there. Who cares about what studio is doing what? Look at the top 100 top free games in Germany. Now you use your Android phone and you start downloading those games. For example, if I go to the US and I look at driving academy, say in another competing store, I am today in the morning ranked 18. What does it mean? There are 17 people better than me. So I play those 17 games, understand what they do, and make a better product. It cannot be better than this, boss. If you ask Domino's why is Pizza Hut better than you, they'll give you some garbled answer. But if you tell someone why is this app better than me, it's public. You got to download the game, play it, and understand it for yourself. So you can understand any market in the world by just downloading those games in the categories you want, playing them, and analyzing them.
Alok, earlier you said, don't try too hard. This is a clear example of how simplistically,
Yeah.
one can learn by just downloading the game. That's all.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Alok, on that. Vinay, the next question is to you. Due to COVID, though game usage has increased, but do you see ad revenues of the game publishers is also increasing, or they are facing a drop at this point in time?
Great. Yeah, thanks for the question. The ad revenue has increased for certain developers because the usage of games and apps has increased significantly over the last, let's say, month. Uh, it's kind of unfortunate, of course. I mean, the situation isn't the best, and it's not right for us to be greatly happy about the entire scenario. But the fact of the matter is, more people are at home and they are playing more games, and hence the users are increasing. And even though the advertisers overall in the market have kind of paused their spends to some extent, there is still a significant increase in user base, and hence the revenues have increased.
Got it. So the way I hear you say, Vinay, is that for a couple of developers in a particular markets, there has been a shift in revenue that has gone up due to the lockdown situation in the world.
Yeah, it will be obviously category based. So there are certain categories of games that would have done well.
Yeah.
Board games, multiple games, etc. Not every kind of app or every kind of game would have done well in this time.
Got it. Thank you so much for that. Sharon, the question is to you. Can you please guide us with the better monetization strategy for the kids' games?
Oh wow, nice question. I also noticed the question that I'm seeing on my screen has an exclamation mark. So games. Look, kids games are a really exciting place for most people. I work with a couple of publishers that uh, are able to crack that and do really well. It's important to understand who you're monetizing with when it comes to a kids game, right? Who is your audience? This is retail 101, right? When you go to a shop, if you are in charge of setting up the merchandising or the layout or the pricing in a shop, in a toy store, who are you doing it for? So visually, you're doing it for one person, and pricing wise, you're doing it for a different person, right?
Yeah.
You are targeting the children for the content, but you're targeting your monetization is targeting parents. What is the trade-off that they have to give this screen to their child where they can spend X amount of time and get some values of entertainment, education, whatever your game tends to impart, and what does it buying the parent? What is buying
Yeah.
the parent often is this time to themselves where they can self-reflect, self-heal. As a parent to a very young child who will start, playing on playing on kids games soon, I can tell you that there's a lot of guilt I carry, right? When I'm not even looking, when I'm looking at work, I'm looking at something else. So uh, it's important to address what value and understand what value you bring the parent and the price point. Right? So I would say for kids games, don't shy away from recognizing the value that a parent will put into a good quality experience for their child. Don't just say I want to do, I don't want to charge because kids won't pay. You're not charging the child, right? You're
Yeah.
giving value to the child and the parent. And I would say build your strategy around that, especially for global markets, because not most countries in the world, or a lot of countries in the world, people can't just hire full-time help to take care of their kids. Right?
Yeah.
Think about that.
Alok has something to say. Add on to this, please.
Sharan, you're so right. In my book, I write about a very deep, profound insight I had in a retail store in London. I was as a socks merchandiser. I used to keep on buying socks, men's socks, of different brands to check their quality and their price, because you can reverse engineer your price. And I was going to the checkout store, and I unfortunately bumped into a lady, and I toppled her basket that she was carrying, and out of that basket spilled lots more socks that she had bought. And this is what hit me so hard, it changed my entire business strategy. I saw baby socks coming out of that basket, and the labels were turned. So the baby socks were priced at 9.99 Deutsche Marks at that time, and men 39 to 41 were also priced at 9.99. So the baby sock was so small, the man sock was, I can't fit it in the screen. And the mother who was buying for the child and the husband did not discriminate between the price for the 4-month-old baby and the 40-year-old man. And that told me that price is in the head, not in the size or in the product.
Yeah, as goes the old saying. I think the price is something which consumer is willing to pay. It has nothing to do with the cost at all. Yeah,
Correct. Correct.
and there we go. So we are right in time. We got one more question to take for you, Alok, and you'll
Okay,
laugh
great.
on reading this. So when you know is the right and a peak time to enter into the gaming industry? Is it already
Okay.
gone?
Absolutely not. So how I look at it is, paradigm shifts. You should read. Well, forget it. There are lots of things I can tell you to read, but it'll confuse you. So the way I look at it is, look at the change in entertainment in the world. Look at the way we're, kind of figuring out what we do with ourselves. I don't think there is a concept of peak at all. I think there is a danger in the form factor. So what happened with PC, console, became mobile, became web, browser, and then suddenly browser became a smartphone. So the question is, what will smartphone become? It'll become something X. So you have to separate milk and water. Milk is gaming, understanding gaming. Water is the form factor. You can put milk and it adapt to anything you put it in. So I used to make games for brands, and I began making games for Java phones, and I did it for browser. Now I do it for mobile games. You can't take a gamer away from entertaining people. Yeah, sure, yeah, we'll do games, on Mars if we have to, if that's the new market product fit and the consumers have moved to Mars and someone has taken them there. But as long as you understand gaming, there's always going to be a business around. Remember, gaming is a $140 billion industry, larger than all the entertainment worlds put together, and it's just beginning. So why do you fear? There's no peak at all.
Perfect. I think the question is very similar to what my friends continue to ask me, that what is the right time to invest in mutual funds or shares? There is no right or wrong time. It's reading those markets, right? So thank you for taking that, and this brings us to end of the session. Thank you so much, our panelists Alok, Sharan, Vinay, Shubham, for being here today. I hope audience is learned a lot from each one of you. Thank you once again for being part of the third episode of Google Game Summit 2020. We really, really appreciate your time and enthusiasm to be here and make our audience learn. Let me, reassure my audience once again then that in this journey we are all together. See you all next Friday once again with something very new. Thank you all.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.